Hello and welcome to Politics here on France 24. We'll be discussing this week the outcome of a so-called crisis summit convened by the president, Nicolas Sarkozy, and the major unions. They were there to discuss some emergency measures to help fight record unemployment here in France. With me to discuss the issue today is Christophe Aguiton, who is with the anti-globalization organization ATTAC. Hello and welcome.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. Mark Dean with Bloomberg News, and Denis de Montpion with the Nouvel Observateur. So, if I'm correct, it was the fifth time, and probably the last time, Nicolas Sarkozy met with the unions in the Élysée for this social summit. It was initially supposed to be a social summit. It became a crisis summit after France lost its AAA with one of the rating agency, Standard & Poor's. There were some small decisions, some big disagreement, all this against the backdrop of general elections less than 100 days away.
Emergency measures to get people back to work. Still, it seems there's no magic formula for solving France's unemployment problem. More flexi time, more training for reinsertion, and fewer fees for employers hiring young people. These were the points agreed upon when French union leaders met with President Nicolas Sarkozy on Wednesday.
We're doing everything we can to keep people in work, including in part-time work. In addition to this, we've agreed on an unprecedented training program for the long-term unemployed.
The French president is calling for an overhaul of labour legislation, pledging 430 million euros to improving employment levels and boosting personnel at job centres. Employers' union leader Laurence Parisot committed to a plan that would see 60,000 people back in the workforce in the coming year. But there were a number of sticking points between trade unions and the administration. Bernard Thibault lamented the lack of progress achieved by these talks, evoking a major point of contention, the prohibitive costs for small businesses.
Now, we've reached a point where we have a disagreement about a specific notion. This has been confirmed today in our talks. The real reason for unemployment levels in France being so high is the cost of employing people.
At just 3 months from the presidential election, these talks come at a tense time for Nicolas Sarkozy. He's been under pressure to take decisive action against unemployment, which has been on the rise since he came to power in 2007.
Christophe Aguiton, too little, too late?
Oh, it's more than little. When you say it's small, it's a nice formula because it's really nothing. If you look at what they announced, it's 430 million for 3 main measures. And if you look at what the German did, it was 6 billion only for the partial unemployment, which is more than 20 times more. And of course, those kind of measures will have almost no effect at all, not effect at all. And some of these measures are only a way to do the opposite of what they did recently. I give you one example. They give 1,000 employment in the Pôle emploi, which is more or less the service for unemployed. But last year, they had cancelled 800 employment, meaning that at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And frankly, we are extremely far of what was needed for the unemployment. We need good income for the unemployed. We need measures to limit the fact that companies are outsourcing and downsizing, and those measures are needed, but they were not announced yesterday.
But was there any way for Nicolas Sarkozy to announce big measures? I mean, there were some disagreements. He's still hoping to present something, but given the economic situation, could anything more be?
Well, I mean, Nicolas Sarkozy, and none of us should kid ourselves. I think the real announcement here was the loss of France's AAA credit rating on Friday, and this was just a sort of sop to try and cover that up. And, you're coming into a presidential campaign, things are looking bad, and you need something to do, and you turn to your advisor, the bureaucrat, the finance ministry, and say, well, what can you do? And well, funny enough, the finance ministry has had a project in its back pocket for 5 years, and that's about labor costs, and it comes up with this. But of course, it's not easy, and the unions aren't going to give anything to Nicolas Sarkozy at this stage in the game. So, I think it looks pretty much like a flop.
Do you agree? A flop? Or at least, there were some agreements. It might not be much, but at least some.
Well, he looks in a very desperate situation, reminds me of a captain in a sinking ship, and he tries to, get away from it because
But
he
he's
knows,
staying on board, unlike some of the-
at least.
Until
But
now.
until now, he's got 3 months ahead, and he has to do, whatever he can. But for unemployment, it's not, from yesterday, because we've been slowing down, for employment for 6 months now, and he never mentioned anything for the past,
Well, he had actually promised a year or so ago that unemployment would decrease in France, and obviously the economic situation is showing that unemployment is on the rise.
Well, okay, but the problem for him today is to reach, the 3 million unemployed people. I think it's the major reason why he had this summit this week, because we are, nearly 3 million, but he has to save up at least, this. Psychologically, it's very important for French citizen and voter, and that's why he wants to avoid that. But what he announced yesterday, doesn't show the way to avoid really.
But there are other measures,
Tragic
more
events.
serious, or
exactly.
like more in-depth measures that are being discussed and that he should announce.
But that's the main problem, because if you look at what was said yesterday, it's almost nothing. And we know that with those measures announced yesterday, and with the recession that France is entering in today, the result is clear. The unemployment will rise, and probably the 3 million will be reached soon, which is really a pity for everyone in this country. But what the president wants to announce in 2 weeks, it's another measure much more important. It's to change totally the fiscal policy in this country, and to pass all the family allowance who are today paid by the employers to the value-added tax. And that is a big change, of course, because it's a big gift for the employers. It's 5 point of the cost of the labor. It's not nothing. But for the French society, it will mean 2% of the value-added tax more, meaning that everyone will pay something, will benefit only to the employers. And that will announce it in 2 weeks. And of course, that explains why the union were very reluctant yesterday to say good thing from this summit, because there were very few things, but because also everyone knows that tomorrow another measure will be announced.
Is this Nicolas Sarkozy is pushing, or seems to be pushing, this idea of transferring some of the costs from labor to this more higher VAT? Is this something that's very risky for him to do? Because as everyone can agree, it is a big deal if it's done. It appears rather technical, but in terms of financing the welfare state, it would be a big change.
Well, the polls show that this is very unpopular, and this is
Right.
because it is an increase in costs for basically everyone in France, and especially people on low incomes, pensioners, etc. This absolutely hits them. I think economists widely have the opposite point of view and are concerned about labor costs in France, and
They're saying it's a good thing.
They're saying it's a good thing. Yeah, exactly. But I think that politically, it's a very, very tough sell, and you almost ask whether Sarkozy is a bit. It's almost like suicidal going into an election campaign and putting this as your one of your main proposals.
Do you agree? Why would he do this? If it's unpopular, obviously on the left, but also with some people on the right within his own party. Let's remember in 2007, the proposal was more or less in the air before parliamentary elections, and most commentators say the Conservatives lost quite a few seats because just the idea was in the air.
Yeah, but he realizes today that he has no time, and anyway, he's already in campaign, because he knows that politically he cannot anyway vote such law before the end of the mandate of the deputy, because they will be off soon, by mid-February. Therefore, the way he behaves today is just, as a candidate, really.
But if you're a candidate, why would you push for something which seems to be unpopular, maybe more popular with the markets than the French?
But because I think he believes that, he has to show to the voters that he's different from a man like Hollande, who doesn't say much on that. We don't hear him on these subjects. So at least he wants to appear the man who is able to reform and do something to save what he can save, you know. And
Go ahead.
No,
it's very risky, but still, you know, it's how he has behaved for the past 5 years. Yeah.
As you, I think it's a little bit his last card. He's very far in the opinion poll at the first level, but also at the second turn of the election.
Right.
And exactly as you say, the only card he has is to show that he's an acting president, instead of the others candidate who are only talking. He's acting. For this reason, he's trying to show that he's really going until the last day with big decision. And in practice, we have to listen what Bernard Thibault, the leader of the CGT, said, because that is a possibility. The idea is that he will announce something in end of January, try to pass at the parliament in February. Difficult, I agree with you, but he will try to do that, to
He's got
have
no
a
majority
measure,
at the Senate. So
to have a
it will be
measure
very
which
tough.
apply immediately for the employers, meaning they have immediately recovered their money and they are happy with that, and to push the introduction of the value added tax after the election, to let the burden on the next president, probably François Hollande, if the opinion polls are still at the same level. That is probably the trick he's trying to do, but it's very risky, I agree, and I think that the people in France are not, en français on dit dupe, realize what's happening. It's not something this game is so obvious that everyone is realizing the truth that he's playing his last card.
Right. In terms of the unions, they are quite divided on how to act or how to react to Nicolas Sarkozy. I mean, it has happened in the past, obviously. Unions have called for people to go to the streets. I mean, could this happen before the election?
In this issue, except one union, but very small one, everyone disagree with this idea to transfer the employer's contribution to the VAT.
I understand that.
That's clear. After that, everyone knows that in France, during an election, it's difficult to have movement because people have another way to change the politics, is to vote. And it's very rare to have a big mass demonstration and strike during the electoral period. But of course, the union will be reacting strongly, and that can help to reduce the popularity of the president and also to let him lose at the presidential election. That's the big game, and we will see in the next day how the union are reacting. But probably they will be very strongly against this measure, and perhaps one day of action. But it's probable that the real reaction on the street will be after the election and not before.
Right. So do you see Nicolas Sarkozy as continuing pushing this reform, that reform to the very end? This seems to be the decision that has been made. You know, let's keep moving, because if not, I'm dead.
Well, that's Sarkozy's instinct, isn't it? Keep moving, or if not, I'm dead. I mean, you know, in a way, he's right, and this is a risky strategy. It's not an impossible strategy. I think that this idea of VAT, social VAT, has been kicking around for a while. I think that it's been kicking around in the Socialist Party as well, and this was possibly stealing a bit of thunder from an attempt to steal a bit of thunder from them. His only hope is to consolidate his base, which are the MEDEF, the small business people, the business people, and hope to get through to the second round, and then just bash François Hollande and the socialists to death, saying, you've got no plan for this country. What have you announced? This is the only way forward.
Right, but Nicolas Sarkozy, and he's done this in the past, can sometimes be surprising in terms of taking some measures that will actually also please centrist and even leftist voters. So do you see him maybe as pushing the VAT, for example, which would please the right, but maybe moving to the left on some issues like gay marriage or stuff like that?
He's fully aware that this subject is very embarrassing for the left. So by organizing this summit this week, what he tries to do as well, it's to try to make people forget that he's been highly responsible for the crisis we are through, and not I don't mean the general crisis, but the fact that he was for 4 years very spendthrift with the public money, and he never really thought that we would reach such a level of unemployment in France, and so he's always as Mark said always acting to prove that he's the man of the situation.
Do you think that Sarkozy
No,
will make some moves that will please maybe the unions, for example?
The union not. It's true, you are right, that what he's trying to do is to have a multiplication of announcements. And there is this one, but there is also this idea that France will start with the Tobin tax. At least it's what they said. We'll see if they apply
on financial transactions.
On financial
he said it
transactions.
again this week, that
Exactly.
he will push, France will go ahead, even if the other European
That was the
countries
announcement,
don't.
and that, of course, it's an opening to the left, even to Attac, because Attac was promoting this measure for long, more than 10 years, is also...
So you agree with him on this?
I think that we have to start. I don't think that Sarkozy will do it. What he will do probably, it's a small tax on the share market, exactly the same than in England. That is probably what at the end he will do, which is a very minimal measure, which is okay, no problem with this measure, but it's something like that. It's really 1 millimeter when we need much more than that. And perhaps the gay marriage will be another issue. It was the Journal Libération who announced that. I don't know if it's true, but that's a possibility, because Sarkozy tried to play all those cards at the same time. But the main issue for the French people is this value-added tax, because that is really directly the income of the French who will be reduced by this measure.
Right, yeah, but the difference today is that we are not no more in 2007, because it's not the same campaign. He's been in charge for 5 years,
Absolutely.
and the voters will say, what have you done?
Especially, just as a last word, Nicolas Sarkozy portrayed himself as the president of the purchasing power. And so his opponents will have maybe a field day saying, if you raise the value-added taxes, you're reducing the purchasing power you're promised to increase.
It's a total reversal from his 2007 campaign, and I think it shows the errors of that campaign and that strategy. But that's something that's very difficult for him to defend.
But he could pull it out.
I think his strategy now is partly to make it a referendum on Hollande and it's the classic incumbent versus challenger campaign where he's saying, well, you don't have an experience, and the challenger has to say, well, it's time to kick them out.
Okay. No, it can be very good in a campaign.
Let's see. Nicolas Sarkozy is never dead. We'll see how this shapes out. I want to thank all of you for coming and you for watching this edition of Politics here on France 24.